Yeah, Sienna, I think we're about ready to go.
All right, sounds good. Well, welcome everyone to our New Amsterdam Grasslands introductory presentation and kind of our Meet the Team presentation. Thank you everyone for coming and for signing up and for your interest. So many of you have this preserve right in your backyard, and we thought that this would be a good opportunity since spring is on its way and winter's just wrapping up. We thought it would be a good opportunity to share some information about the preserve, explain why it's important, and give everybody a chance to answer questions or to ask their questions, and then we'll be answering them. So I hope everyone's excited to learn more about this special place. It's one of my favorite places to visit in the La Crosse area. It's really nice. And I wish we could be there in person today, but we made sure to put some nice pictures of the preserve in the presentation for you all. And then you can always go visit after if you'd like. It's a nice day. So just a couple things before we start. I mentioned this already to everybody, and it seems like everybody's turned their video off, but if it ends up getting turned back on, just if you don't want, we're recording this presentation. We'll be posting it on our YouTube page afterwards. So if you'd like to watch it again, you can always find it there. It'll also be on our webpage under resources and videos. And we'll get that up shortly within the next week or so. And you can find it there. But since we're recording the presentation, if you do not want your video on the presentation recording, then just make sure to select stop video, which is on the bottom left corner of your screen. And also just during the presentation, we ask that everybody stay on mute, which is also in the bottom left corner of your screen. It's the microphone icon. So besides that, as I mentioned, as we present, as you get questions, please type them into the chat and we'll address those questions right away at the end. And then we'll move to any additional questions, which you can still ask through the chat. Otherwise, there's not so many people that I think will be really stepping on each other. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question once we finish going through the questions from chat. And let's see, anything else to cover? If you have any technical issues, put those in the chat as well. We'll be monitoring them during the presentation. But besides that, I think we're ready to get started. So as I said, this presentation is on one of our most special nature preserves, New Amsterdam Grasslands. It's right in our backyard here in La Crosse, and for those of you here that are from Holman. It is not switching. Oh, well, let me just quick pull it back up again. Sorry, everyone. It must have froze. All right, here we go. So I'm Sienna Muehlfeld. I'm the restoration coordinator with Mississippi Valley Conservancy. So I handle most of our land restoration volunteering events. I coordinate our volunteers and help plan the events. And I also do a lot of our land management work with Levi on our nature preserves. And then Pat, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Pat Caffrey. I'm a retired civil engineer, and I've been volunteering at the New Amsterdam Grasslands since 2004. It's a beautiful place, and it's really a rewarding site to work on. Levi.
Yeah, I'm Levi Plath. I'm the land manager for Mississippi Valley Conservancy, and I've been with the Conservancy since 2015. And yeah, it's my job to kind of help to manage our nature preserves and get funding for all of our habitat restoration projects. And yeah, do a lot of hands-on work out there on the land.
All right, so New Amsterdam Grasslands is one of 23 nature preserves that is owned and managed by Mississippi Valley Conservancy in Wisconsin's Driftless area. If you want to learn more about Mississippi Valley Conservancy, you can visit our website at www.mississippivalleyconservancy.org. There's a lot of great resources on that page, including other resources in the community if you're interested. So a few things, basic things about the preserve and some history. Craig Thompson, who has worked for the DNR for a long time, and he's just an amazing birder and knows so much. He discovered the potential of this preserve in 1997 when he was kind of driving by. He had driven by it so many times, and he thought about how many interesting grassland birds must live there, because it's so rare to have a big expanse of grassland, especially nowadays. So he thought there's got to be a way that we can protect this land. So he worked with other partners and with Mississippi Valley Conservancy to arrange for this parcel to be saved and eventually donated to the Conservancy by Northern Engraving Company, who very generously did the initial purchase. And then with a Wisconsin Knowles Nelson Stewardship grant, we were able to purchase the remainder, or the other half of the property. And then Northern Engraving donated their portion of the property. So that was in 2008 when we acquired it officially. The preserve is 310 total acres, and 35 of those acres are open year round, and 275 of those acres are closed from April 1st until July 31st. And the reason for that we will explain later, but it's to protect grassland bird nesting. So just a little bit about the preserve here. You can see an overhead view of it. So the shaded purple section is open all year. So that's that 35-acre section. And then the rest, which is in gray, is seasonally closed. So that's that larger portion that's closed during nesting season. The entrance that's starred off of County Highway NA, that is an entrance that you can use year round. And then there's a fence around other portions, pretty much the rest of the preserve, so that we keep the accesses to these 3 points. But during the portion of the year when the seasonally closed portion is open, there's an entrance here by the subdivision. And then there's an entrance here from the apartment building. And that entrance is private and exclusive for apartment building residents. And that's a relatively new entrance. But there's a trail around each portion of the preserve. And that we'll explain later too, the reason for that. But those are the trails. And the trails are seasonally open and closed just at the same time as the rest of the property. So this place is very important, and it's important because grassland birds use it and actually nest in it, some very rare grassland birds. And this is important because we've lost 3 billion birds since 1970, which is a 30% decline. And that's due to all sorts of factors, including habitat loss as one of the major factors. Grassland birds are the most threatened. The 3 billion birds lost includes all birds, but nearly half of grassland birds have been lost. So they're the most threatened. of all of the taxa, of all the groups of birds. And also, just the habitat in general is really important. Wisconsin's native tallgrass prairie, only a very small fraction, less than 0.5% of what originally used to be native tallgrass prairie in Wisconsin remains that habitat today. And that's according to the Wisconsin DNR. So this preserve is a really, as I said, it's a large expanse of grasslands. It's a rare, large parcel and expanse of grasslands. So it's a really important sanctuary for rare prairie wildlife. So that includes the rare grassland birds, but also other prairie wildlife, plants, rare prairie plants, including threatened special concern plants, and also pollinators. So that's bees and butterflies. All of these species are really important for the health of the land. And pollinators pollinate the food that we eat, and it also purifies the air that we breathe. It catches flood water. It prevents erosion. It prevents, like I said, flooding. So all of these species are really important, and they help us. And we also want healthy soil and wildlife too. So there's other benefits to this preserve too. New Amsterdam Grasslands offers outdoor recreation for all ages, including school groups. It offers scenic views of the bluffs, and it's very nice to look out over a beautiful grassland and look at all the colors of all the prairie wildflowers and native prairie grasses. It's an important property for nature education and research, especially considering all of the management that we do there. We're monitoring the transition from what it used to be, which was basically fallow farm field, to restored prairie. So it's really important for research, and again, very important for education about the importance of prairies and the importance of saving habitat for grassland birds. And everyone can do a lot of activities here, including walking, hiking, running, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, nature photography, and many more. As I said, the grasslands reduces flooding, runoff, and pollution, which benefits everyone in the community, especially. And then it protects the climate by storing carbon underground, because prairie grasses actually store prairie grasses and forbs. So those are just the other prairie plants. They have really deep and sometimes wide-spreading roots. So most of the plant is actually underground. So that's what we mean by saying that it stores carbon underground. So we're just going to briefly talk about how we manage for different important reasons. So next we're going to talk about managing the property specifically for grassland birds to help with those problems and the declines that I mentioned earlier.
There are two state threatened species on this property, the Henslow Sparrow and the Bell's Vireo. They have very different habitat requirements. The Henslow Sparrow likes open grassland areas, tall, thick grass. They do not like to nest within about 100 yards of trees or tall shrubs. And they also like to have 3 years or more of thatch buildup before they nest in an area. So they're pretty fussy. The Bell's Vireo likes thick clumps of brush, even overgrown with vines, but surrounded by grassland areas. So you have a mixture of 60 to 80% of the area in grass and 20 to 40% in these clumps of thick brush. So obviously we have to manage different areas of the site for the two different species because their habitat requirements are so different. There's also 10 other species of greatest conservation need that nest on the site, but most of those will be happy either in both of the habitats for the Henslow or the bells, or in one or the other. This does create some management headaches for us. With the Henslow, we really want to remove all the woody species, and normally in a prairie, when you do that by using fairly frequent prescribed burns. However, they also want 3 years of thatch buildup, and so every time you burn, it means that area is not available for nesting for the next 3 years. So we end up doing lots of hand cutting and treating of woody species in the Henslow Sparrow areas, which is more time intensive. In the Bells Vireo areas, we'd like to control the brush to try to keep 60 or 80% into grass. And much of the brush is what we call clonal species. They spread via rhizomes, in particular sumac and prickly ash. And those are often controlled by repeated mowing during the growing season. If you mow them 2 or 3 times a year during the growing season for a couple of years in a row, you can eliminate them. However, on this site, the growing season is also the nesting season, so we can't do that. We can mow after August 1st. And some years, the brush will resprout and then you can mow it again. And that really sets it back because it pulls more of the energy out of the root systems. But last fall was a good example when I mowed some of that right after August 1st, and it was a dry spell and it did not resprout. So that also adds to some of the work that's required. Another consideration is that we have planted areas of, when we acquired the property, it was pretty much all smooth brome and trees and brush. It had been ag many years prior to that. We're trying to restore it to native prairie, one, because we like native prairie, but two, because native plants provide more food for native insects. And so you get a greater density of insects. And the birds feeding their nestlings rely heavily on insects for the high protein to help those nestlings grow. And so you get greater nesting density in areas with native habitat than you do with what we call surrogate habitat, or the smooth brome, which is a non-native grass species. So next slide, Sienna. As a result, trying to balance all of these, we put together a long range management plan. This, I think, went out 10 years. This happens to be an image of the slide that was for the management for the year 2020. The area highlighted in red was the proposed prescribed burn area. That's about 40 acres. We didn't burn it because of COVID last year, so hopefully that'll get burned next year. The area highlighted in lime green is an area that was burned in 2018. And so that has 2 years of thatch buildup and is so sort of is on a borderline of becoming Henslow habitat. And then the crosshatched areas are areas that are open grasslands that have not been burned for 3 years. And so that is available Henslow habitat. So we try to schedule all the work so we maintain at least 100 acres available for Henslow habitat. You can also see on this slide along the right-hand edge or the east side along Highway 53 on Unit 7 and 6, the brushy areas. And then also in the northwest or upper left corner of Unit 2, a brushy area. Those are the areas we manage for the Bells Vireo. And some of these units 1, 2, 3, and parts of 4, 6, and 7 have been planted to native prairie. Units 4 and 5 are still the smooth brome primarily. Over the years, we've removed hundreds of trees from this property. Unit 2 was pretty much overgrown, and much of Unit 6 and 7. So there's been a lot of work. We did that gradually because sometimes changing the habitat too drastically all at once, even though you're improving it, can scare off the birds. And so we spent about 5 years removing trees from Unit 6 and 7, burned lots of brush piles.
What's thatch, Pat? In case somebody doesn't know what thatch is.
Thatch is the vegetative matter from the previous year's growth, the dead grass and forbs that lay down and start to decompose on the grass surface. It's all, you might call it duff as well, but it's, and I think what it does that the Henslows like is you get a different class of insects, some of the beetles and bugs that really like to forage on that decaying vegetable matter. And it also provides some pretty good hiding spots. So for whatever reason, they require that before they'll nest in an area. Now, someone had asked about coyotes, and that's pretty interesting in this site. When we acquired this property, and it was first identified even before we acquired it, Northern Engraving acquired it, Craig Thompson, who Sienna mentioned earlier, was concerned about the impact of predators, and coyotes and cats were the two that he thought might have an adverse effect on the nesting success of the ground nesting birds, since they build their nests on or very near the ground. Since then, there's been a lot of studies, largely with the advent of trail cameras. And it's been, some of my interest was triggered by a seminar that Professor Scott Cooper from UWL gave a few years ago to prairie enthusiasts, showing that 13-line ground squirrels, which are very common on this site and in most prairie areas in Wisconsin, have a diet that's over 50% non-vegetable. So it's animals, insects, and small animals that they eat. And since then, research has shown that having coyotes on the site, although they may occasionally predate a bird nest, it's really too small for them to bother with much. But they control the population of the 13-line ground squirrels, which are very effective predators of ground nesting birds. So having the coyotes there actually benefits bird nesting. Those studies also showed that they did not find any sites where they had both coyotes and cats showing up in their trail cams. And the implication is that the coyotes predate the cats, and the cats know if there's coyotes there, they don't want to go out there. So having the coyotes there is definitely beneficial for the success of the nesting birds. There is a coyote den on site. Right now is the breeding season for coyote, and I've seen tracks out there in raised leg urinations, which means there's a breeding pair on site. So hopefully we'll have more coyotes next spring. But the coyotes are definitely a plus for the site, and they help with the nesting birds.
Ready to move forward, Pat?
Yeah, I think that's it. I just repeating again, most of our work has to be done outside of the nesting season, which makes it difficult. There's a few things we need to do during the nesting season because of some species that require control that's seasonable. But I think that's all I have for now, Sienna.
Okay. So another thing that we do to help birds and protect their nests is we seasonally close that one portion that you all saw. We also do not allow dogs because they can disturb nests and birds are afraid of them. And so it disturbs them, especially the nestlings are really afraid of dogs. So we have no dogs allowed policy on the preserve because of that. And again, that's just because these birds are so threatened and declining so much in our area. So they just need somewhere as a refuge. We also have a limit on the number of access points, and we did that by fencing around the preserve, and that just prevents people from coming in or just anybody, dogs, pets, cats, anything from coming in. We kind of try to limit that to our access points as much as we can. And that way everybody sees our educational materials, our allowable activities sign, and all of that. So everybody's on the same page about the property rules and what they need to do to protect these, the birds and wildlife and the sensitive prairie plants. So we also put the trails on the property edges instead of through the prairie because some grassland birds, most of them need large expanses of uninterrupted grassland, and trails actually break up the grassland. So it decreases the value of the habitat for certain birds, and some birds actually can't use the habitat if we built the trail through the middle of the property, for example. So that's why we have the trails on the outside, because it's important for us to offer recreational opportunities and to allow people to visit and to welcome people onto the property. We just want to, as much as possible, keep the impacts of trails on the outside because of that. We also have educational and outreach activities on the preserve. And so that helps birds because we're helping to educate the public and neighbors about the importance of grassland birds, why they need our help, the importance of prairie habitat, and the importance of property rules. So we want to explain why we have the rules because, of course, if there weren't good reasons to have the rules, it doesn't make much sense to have them. So we want everyone to be on the same page about why we have the rules and why they're important. So this has actually been pretty helpful. We've had a lot of success with this approach so far, and we're hoping to keep having more success as we move forward with our management. But I just wanted to talk to you all about some success stories that these practices have had. So for the Henslow Sparrow, we haven't seen much of an increase at New Amsterdam Grasslands, but we have seen the Henslow Sparrow population stay stable. It's stayed the same pretty much every year. And that's just because, as Pat said, they're really picky and they need that 2 to 4 years or something, or about ideally 3 years of that thatch buildup. So regardless, Henslow Sparrow has had a really sharp regional decline, and it's a threatened statewide bird. It's a threatened bird statewide. But we've managed to keep the population stable. We've kept it from declining at New Amsterdam Grasslands, and that's thanks to our management. And for Bell's Vireo, we've actually seen a notable increase at New Amsterdam Grasslands. This bird is regionally stable, so it's staying the same but it is declining and threatened statewide. Their population is only a fraction of what it used to be. So it's really a refuge for Bell's Vireo and for Henslow Sparrow, which is great because those are our target species because they're the most threatened. Other grassland birds that are declining regionally, so that's just in our driftless area, but are increasing at New Amsterdam Grasslands. So that's a great success story. These 4 species, clay-colored sparrow, sedge wren, field sparrow, and grasshopper sparrow. So as Pat mentioned, as we manage for these threatened grassland bird species, we're also helping a lot of other species at the same time. And we hope to increase this positive impact over time also.
Yeah, so I guess I'll take this next section. So aside from managing the nature preserve for the birds themselves, I guess we'll go over a little bit of just managing for the health of the land and all the wildlife that's there. Next, Sienna. Yeah, so just as a part of managing the property and the land in general, Pat Caffrey is kind of the go-to guy for this property. He's our site steward, and he spends a lot of time out there. Sienna and I don't get out to this nature preserve nearly as much as Pat does, but whenever we can, we're out there helping to remove invasive species, either through herbicide treatment of some herbaceous plants, cut and treat methods for some of the brush in those areas where we're managing for the Henslow sparrows. And as we get rid of the invasive species out there, obviously that just makes more room for the native plants to grow and spread and provide more habitat, better suitable habitat for the wildlife out there. And this picture on this slide, I'm sure if you've been to this nature preserve, you've seen something that looked like this in some of those windrows of trees and along the fences. And this is Oriental Bittersweet. It's an invasive out there. It's not horribly out of control. It gets a lot more out of control in areas where there are a lot of trees and brush, which is one thing we're trying to limit in certain areas. So obviously getting rid of invasive species that would provide more of a monoculture in some areas allows for more biodiversity throughout the whole property. And as we restore prairie through getting rid of some of those invasive species, it helps to keep the soil where it is, thanks to those nice, deep, and robust root systems of those prairie plants. Next slide, Sienna. Another way that we help to manage the land is through prescribed burning. If any of you are neighbors to New Amsterdam Grasslands or have been in the Holman area around mid-April to early May, no doubt you have at one point or another seen some smoke emitting from New Amsterdam Grasslands as a result of our prescribed burns. So the reason that we burn out there is that it's hard on some of those invasive species, and it basically evens the playing field for all of the plants out there. So it gives some of those smaller plants and the ones that aren't as competitive and fast growing, it gives them a little bit better of a chance at germinating and providing better habitat for those insects and eventually for the birds who eat the insects. Yeah, prescribed burning knocks down those invasive species. The Oriental Bittersweet, the honeysuckle, buckthorn, prickly ash, basically any of those woody invasives are impacted by fire. And then it gives some of those native prairie plants a chance to grow and gives them a chance to outcompete them. Next slide, Sienna. And in those areas that we clear brush or get rid of invasive species, we do collect prairie seed from the nice big tracts of prairie that are out there. We'll collect grass seed, particularly those species of grass that we can just broadcast in areas that we've already cleared, so that it gives the prairie a bit better chance of taking hold, since some of those invasive species, especially the brushy species, tend to shade out everything else. And so when we get rid of those, we're left with a lot of bare soil. And if we don't broadcast a whole lot of seed in there, then we're left with the next generation of brushy stuff that happens to sprout up. So we typically collect seed in the fall from around October through mid-November. And then we'll broadcast it in some of those areas that we've cleared, or in some instances, we'll collect seed of more of the prairie forbs and scatter those in areas that are really dense with the prairie grass, just to give a little bit more diversity into a certain area. So there's a couple different reasons that we collect seed in a couple of different areas that we scatter it. So, and yeah, obviously it's a good thing to get rid of the invasive species and try to convert those areas into prairie. Yeah, so the property rules, as Sienna mentioned, that we don't allow dogs on the nature preserve, and the access points are limited out there to those 3 access points total. And in general, keeping those limited access points keeps any disturbance from anyone out there who is using the property, I don't know how to say it, against the rules, so to speak, or with doing any uses out there that are not congruent with kind of the rules that we've set out there. So littering, any soil disturbance, those kinds of things just overall degrade the site. So it's important that we, obviously those access points are going to be the areas that get the highest amount of traffic on the property. So us limiting the access to those points really reduces the stress on the other parts of the nature preserve that are a little bit harder to access, if that makes sense. So yeah, it reduces the stress on the wildlife out there and just helps the native diversity of the plant communities in general if there's not a whole lot of disturbance going on and around the property as a whole. So we like to limit that kind of the disturbance to those access sites.
Right. So, of course, we also manage the grasslands for you and your community. So we offer events and recreational opportunities. That's just for you. We offer guided nature hikes and special events like this one. We offer volunteer opportunities to help us manage the land. We offer the grasslands as a field trip destination for all ages. So often we'll have college groups out there from the 3 colleges around in this area. We also offer it for K through 12 kids. So they really like to get out and collect prairie seed with us. And we like to teach pretty much anyone that's interested. We sometimes have groups from local businesses who want to volunteer and stuff like that. And we like to just teach people a little bit about the importance of the prairie and some of the cool species there and some of the cool stuff that we see. It's pretty much that we see something different and cool every time we go out. So we also maintain the trails for access for you and for public safety. Because of course, if there's a tree or a limb or something else unsafe about our trails or our accesses, we make sure to take care of anything that comes up so that the public is safe and so that everybody can enjoy the property safely. We maintain signs, fences, and parking areas. So just for access and for education, and to make sure everyone's on the same page about rules and everything. And 2 species that a lot of you will know about are wild parsnip, which if you get the oils on you, it reacts with the sun and causes a rash. And of course, everybody knows poison ivy. So we do control those 2 species on the preserve. We can't, of course, get all of it, but we do reduce it and we manage it as much as we have time and funding for. And that's also just to make the preserve a little more user friendly. And also, wild parsnip is an invasive weed. Poison ivy is native, but we don't necessarily want it there, especially right near the trails. And we manage the preserve for scenic value. So that's not the main reason why we manage the preserve this way, but it has these added benefits. So more native plant diversity means more colors. So that's more colors of the native grasses, more colors for the prairie wildflowers. Less brush gives you a better view of the bluffs and of the grasslands. You can see farther, you can see more. Happier, healthier birds. More birds singing offers a better soundtrack. So that's more birds in general and also a greater diversity of birds. It offers more to listen to and more to observe while you're out there. We're always trying to improve the visitor experience. So we're working on improving some of our signage on the preserve as well, and just making everything a little nicer every year as we can. So our future goals and management plans include increasing public awareness about this preserve and the importance of the grasslands, to engage more neighbors in the care of the property, because of course, if it's right in your backyard, you're going to go visit it more. So we're hoping to get people out on the land helping us, or just we're hoping to educate people that live right around there about the treasure in their backyard. We are hoping to continue improving plant diversity, continue reducing invasive weeds. We're hoping to help grassland birds as much as we can, so to continue the positive benefits we've already had and to hopefully further benefit the grassland birds. But the birds are pretty much our top priority on this preserve, as we mentioned, just because they just really need the help. We offer events, and we're going to offer more events and recreational opportunities and volunteer opportunities. And we're going to, as I said, improve the signage. If you would like to get involved with New Amsterdam Grasslands or with Mississippi Valley Conservancy in general, you could become a second site steward for the property that is more of a use site steward. So just kind of monitoring, going around every once in a while and seeing whether the property has any damage and just letting us know, because we can't, of course, be on the property all the time. So we do need help if people can let us know if they notice anything out of place. You can also volunteer for the wild. You can do that at our website under Get Involved and Volunteer. So you can sign up for our general volunteer list. And you can also sign up for any events that are specific to New Amsterdam Grasslands. We post them on Facebook typically. You could, as I said, call out and report rule breakers. So just kindly mention the rules to somebody if they don't know and you notice them breaking the rules. And you can also just let us know so that we can that we can do something about it. You can spread the word about the preserve, what you learned here today. You can invite your friends to visit and enjoy the preserve with you. You could donate to the Conservancy on our website. There's the donate button, and then you can participate in the Conservancy's Trail Trek Challenge, which you can also learn about more on our website. So also on our website, there's a downloadable trail map under nature preserves. That's also on the kiosk on the entrance to county or off of Highway NA. So if you look on the kiosk, you should see a map there as well. But there is a downloadable trail map under nature preserves with information about the property. And there's a really nice video with Craig Thompson and with Pat in it, and with the owner of Northern Engraving Company and others that were involved in the initial acquisition of New Amsterdam Grasslands. It's a really great video. I highly recommend it. That's under our resources page. You have to scroll down. I think it's about the 5th video. And these resources are just some other resources that I cited in the presentation. So the 3 Billion Birds resource page, how you can help beyond just New Amsterdam Grasslands to help with that problem. And then the Wisconsin DNR resource page on prairies to learn more about prairies, especially in Wisconsin. And there's also a link to a WPR segment on the importance of prairie conservation. So thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for helping to protect this treasure. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and now we're going to answer some of the questions that came in through the chat, and then we'll open it up if anybody else has other questions.
Just had one question come through on the chat here about benches. It says, would you ever consider putting just a few benches on the trail to let folks rest during the walk of the trails, and also add to a more enjoyable observation time during the visit? I guess I can take part of that question. Benches on our nature preserves, we have learned, are a bit of a slippery slope. In some cases, our nature preserves come with benches when we have purchased the properties. In general, we are developing a bench policy due to the fact that we've had a number of inquiries about folks placing benches on our nature preserves, not just New Amsterdam Grasslands. So we're in the process of developing a policy in regards to benches. but we've noticed that there's a lot of questions about people placing benches, and the primary goal of our nature preserves is to protect the wildlife habitat. So we like to have as few structures as possible out there. But that's definitely something we're going to be looking at in the future. Pat, do you want to take this next one? The question is, when people hunt in the grasslands, what birds are they hunting?
There are occasionally pheasant on property. More commonly, there are mourning doves, and I know some people have been out there hunting mourning doves. And there are also deer hunters that use the property. I helped one gentleman when I was out there working with my tractor one November, drag a deer out that he'd killed. It's also legal to shoot coyotes. I hope people don't, but that's another possibility. But I think for the birds, it's primarily pheasant and mourning doves.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Next question, is it okay for us to wander a little off the trail if we're careful not to disturb other than footsteps? I would say yes. Certainly, if you're inclined to go off the trail to go see what's out there, yeah, we would encourage you to go out and explore to your heart's content. Obviously, limiting the disturbance off trail is a priority, but yeah, the property is open to the public, so feel free to go out and explore.
So one thing that you could do is make sure that when you enter the property that you kind of brush off your boots or shoes, because sometimes if there's any dirt in there from when you went somewhere else, sometimes that's a way to spread weeds. So that's one way to feel really good about going off trail, is if you brushed off your shoes. I usually do that when I go to a new site.
Yeah, and especially if you try to minimize the off-trail hiking during the April through July period when the birds are nesting. That's when the disruption is most harmful.
All right, it looks like that's it for questions in the chat. If anyone else has a question, I think we have some time left and not too many people to where if you can just unmute yourself and ask a question if you feel the need to. Yeah, Sienna, anything else?
I think we might have a question.
I was just gonna say how much we appreciate having access to the grasslands this last year, especially. I don't know how well we would have made it through the pandemic if we didn't have such a beautiful space to spend our time and to kind of heal and be out in nature and not have to go far from home. So thank you all for everything that you do to help make it such a sacred place.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We're happy that you enjoy it.
Mhm.
Anyone else have any questions or comments or anything? Well, I don't know that I have any more to add, Levi.
All right.
Answering your question.
Yeah, maybe we could just remind folks of the next planned events for New Amsterdam Grasslands if anyone's interested.
Yeah, I guess I would say one more thing about the benches. So we are trying to it's really important that we do make our preserves accessible as possible, and that we make them as friendly to our visitors as possible. So we're just kind of trying to figure out the logistics of it. But we do think that that's a good idea, and we want to offer places for people to rest. But we're just working that out, as Levi said.
And I think it also involves the DNR here, since they paid for half the value of the site. Pretty much everything that MVC does has to be approved through the DNR in advance as well.
Did you ask me something, Levi? I can't.
Just when the next event at New Amsterdam Grasslands is going to be.
Right. So we're going to have some brush clearing events coming up in the summer. And we'll have some opportunities to clear some weeds. So we have some events exclusively for neighbors. So if you are a neighbor and you got our mailing about our neighbor events, then and you're interested in coming to a future event, please email me what event you're interested in. And also please spread the word to any other neighbors that you feel might be interested. And if you didn't get a mailing or our mailing, then please email me directly. My email is Sienna, so SIENA at MississippiValleyConservancy.org. And then also just for general public events, we will post those events on our website events page and also on our Facebook page. So if you follow us on Facebook, that's one way that you'll learn about future events. But we welcome everybody to go visit as often as you would like. We'll certainly have prairie seed collecting opportunities in the fall also. But I think that about does it. Anybody else have any last minute questions? It seems like we do not.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming. It was really great to do this. Thanks for your interest in giving us the opportunity to talk about this preserve. It's really, really a cool place. So, all right, I think we'll wrap it up then. Thanks again.
Yep,
Have a
thanks
good
everyone for
day.
coming.